3, 2, 1. Welcome to the David the Dog Trainer Podcast, episode 97. Today we're joined by the infamous Dog Daddy. Let's get him on. Record. Oh, yeah. Call. Hello. Hang on one second.
Recording in progress.
There we go. Augusto, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
Wonderful. Do you hear us loud and clear?
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. Happy to have you join us, man. How's things going in LA over there?
It's pretty fun, pretty good. The
Yeah.
weather is always good here, so I think it puts you in a good mood every day, when you go out and it's beautiful and sunny.
Yeah. How long have you been there now?
It's been 4 years.
4 years in LA?
Yeah, it's been 4 years. Right before the pandemic had started. So this year I have been traveling, so I'm almost not here.
Yeah.
Traveling back to back.
Yeah. Yeah, you seem ridiculously busy. I was watching your stories that you were posting last night, and you seemed like exhausted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I do it to myself. I really love to be active. It's something that I have always been like that. I have to be doing something all the time.
Yeah.
So the next thing you know, it's like I could be like falling down, but people like my friends, they don't understand how I can keep going. Even if I don't eat all day, I will still be active and yeah, it's crazy. So I have to actually force myself to take care of myself also.
Yeah, take a break. I mean, you were saying that, like I said, even yesterday in your stories, it's just like, when you own a business and you have so much kind of responsibility hanging over you and so many people that, are either reaching out to you for help or people that are depending on you from a employee standpoint or something like that. It is very, very difficult to just shut off.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially when you really love what you do as well,
sure,
it doesn't feel like work, So for me, I can keep going all day. Like literally my classes are supposed to end at 5. There's been times that I'm there at bunch of 7. It gets dark and, for me, it does not feel like I'm making a sacrifice by staying longer. So it's just it's easy to keep going too.
Yeah, 100%. Totally get you. So is this much travel with all the seminars and stuff that you're doing? Is this a newer thing? Were you doing this through the pandemic? I mean, or how new is all the travel?
Well, so I have, things for me started very randomly because it wasn't planned out. We can get into that, but it was basically based on demand of people asking me for help.
Sure.
And so therefore, I really didn't know what direction I was going right from the beginning. What I was, it's not that I decided I'm going to be a dog trainer, I'm going to do a board and train, or I'm going to do one-on-one. It was just kind of based on whatever people asked. And I tried many different ways of helping people through training. So back then when I started getting some publicity with a video that went viral, there was a lot of people from, many different parts of the country and other places that were requesting for me to come help them.
Yeah.
And one time I decided that I was going to do it and I started traveling. I did that for a while, but I had my own dogs and a property to take care of. So after about 1 or 2 years of doing that, and this was maybe 7 years ago.
Yeah.
I then took a break. It was just too hard to leave my own dogs to be able to travel.
Yeah.
And I feel honestly, there's been moments where I was kind of stuck because of the way the things started out for me, like I said, with not having a clear direction on how I'm going to do things or, really what I'm trying to achieve with this. Since when I came to the US, I was not even planning on staying here.
Yeah.
So this dog training thing is what really kept me here, because I was born in the U.S. I grew up in Brazil.
Yeah. My
My family wanted me to come back here, forever, and I never wanted to. I grew up on a farm in Brazil, so I had my own cows and horses and dogs.
Yeah.
My entire childhood, and so when I came here, it was kind of after many years of them insisting that I would at least try it out, and after the first year and I got my first dog and people started asking for help, that's basically how everything started with the professional dog training.
Yeah.
Because my family really never saw a career in it.
Sure.
So I grew up working with dogs, even from childhood. That's the thing that I was attracted to, is communicating with animals and being involved with them. And that was the only thing I focused on,
Yeah.
But in Brazil, they didn't see a future with it. So they always try to actually get me away from that, onto other things.
Yeah.
So long story short, when I started with all this, and like I said, I started doing training, tried many different methods. I did the traveling around, still very confused on like what direction to go. And I guess I could say like I get distracted at times because
Sure.
I was still very young. You know, I moved back here when I turned 18,
Yeah.
on my 18th birthday, and I didn't speak English or anything. And I felt very out of place. I mean, I had a couple of family members, but that was about it. And the lifestyle was definitely very different, especially for me. I grew up in a very isolated farm, like in Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
So I had like, you know, we didn't have fences, we didn't have neighbors right next to us. And so to move into a small, like normal neighborhood area was, you know, very different.
Yeah.
And then, you know, with all that being said, I did travel before, and then got distracted with having my own, with the training, and me having a lot of freedom right away. I became very independent. Like I moved out when I was 19,
Yeah.
was already doing this business full time, even without a clear vision of like what I was doing business wise and where I was trying to get at. It was just people saying, you know, like they were so amazed with what I was accomplishing with one dog, and then it was the neighbor would call me and all the relatives, and it was through word of mouth. And so it kind of like it blew up pretty fast, locally at first in Massachusetts. And then I got distracted. I had my own property, my own, you know, space, and I started getting horses and more dogs, and like people were, you know, dumping dogs to me that were too difficult to handle, which I was basically stuck there just taking care of those dogs.
Yeah.
So essentially I was like overwhelmed a lot of the time. You know, I knew like I love working with dogs, and I knew that was like what I wanted to do. But many times I found that I couldn't do it because I was at home. I was limited, I guess I should say, with like what I could really do. Because if I had some rescue dogs at home and I had my own pack of dogs and all the animals, you know, I couldn't be traveling and doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
So I took a break, and then I moved to California, like I said, 4 years ago. I downsized. At one point, I had a few dozen dogs on a 10-acre property before I moved to California, and it just didn't feel like, you know, that's how I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
It was a very much like a facility setting, and it just didn't feel like it was for me. I had employees helping, but I still felt like I had to really be there. There was a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Because, you know, constantly new dogs coming in, like that just don't know how to behave, and just, you know, a lot of dogs in one place. It's stressful.
100%.
And for me, just something was telling me like that's not it for me.
Yeah.
But I still didn't know like what do I do from here?
Yeah.
So that lasted for a few years. Then moved to California with downsized to 6 dogs staying with me. So all my other dogs, this was 4 years ago is when I made a hard decision, because I was stuck with the dogs that I did have, you know, of my own dogs. And so it was really hard to like, if I really want to pursue more, to be able to do more, whatever it may be, you know, at this point I had realized there was a lot of interest in me, in my style and the style of training. So I thought I think what happened was actually, you know, I blew up on one video blew up on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so from that, people followed me on Facebook back then. And that's where all my business came from.
Yeah.
When Facebook kind of changed the settings a little bit, where like I would get thousands of likes on a photo, you know, now you had to pay for people to see your post. Like things started to slow down a little bit. And I, you know, that's when I realized like really people were finding me on YouTube, not Facebook.
Yeah.
And I started to, you know, to try to post and go back into what really matters if I want to grow. Because I think I always wanted to like build a brand around my name. Not always, but I guess after like I noticed that, you know, people were really interested. So I wanted to focus on posting more videos regularly. And that's when I moved to California and focused on that.
Yeah.
And then that was the pandemic. Things were a little bit, you know, difficult, and everything was slowed down. I had a lot of fun. I definitely felt like the first year was like, the first year was definitely the most successful year I had.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I wasn't a very clear state of mind.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I was at home. So there was just a lot of activities that I could do with my dogs. The weather, was in my favor as well. And I don't know how to explain, but when I looked back, like a lot of things that I just knew I worked really hard. I mean, I was doing this already for a while, and I really just felt like I was held back because I was at the wrong places at the wrong times,
Yeah.
So when I moved to California, I think all these doors all of a sudden opened where I was able to just start being extremely productive. And so a lot of things that I wanted to accomplish all came to life. So those are, it can be like materialistic stuff. It can be just, collaborating with other certain people, just the ability to be able to be more active and productive and, working more. I was more focused. So I was able to accomplish a lot of that.
Yeah.
And then I would say, so at the end of last year, in October of last year, then I started feeling the same way again. Like I just kind of felt a little bit stuck.
Sure.
Like I had my own 6 dogs, and they definitely limit my life a lot if you have 6 dogs.
It's a lot of dogs to have.
Depend on being with me all the time. And especially with my dogs, they have a certain routine that they have to follow.
Sure.
They are trained as a pack. They go out and perform
Yep.
perform together, a certain way. So they have very specific routine that I follow with them. So for example, you're never gonna see anyone else walking my dogs.
Yeah.
Most people don't realize that, but like they're not allowed to walk my dogs. So if I travel and I leave them at home, they're only allowed to take them in the backyard.
Yeah.
They have I'm the only person that walks them. They just have a certain way to do everything for them to maintain that obedience as a pack. So with that being said, I am very locked down when I have the 6 dogs.
Yeah.
And I started feeling a certain way about it because I love it. I mean, I love my dogs.
Of course.
But I just know that there's like more out there for me. And there's also like a huge need for my help.
Yeah.
That if I am, settling down in a way, it's like having kids and settling down and then no longer doing what you're good at and going out there and helping people,
Yeah.
I started feeling that way, and then like again didn't know what direction to go. So in October of last year, one of my friends that I had for about a year, he was like, I moved to Mexico 4 months ago. We have this full house and maids and everything, like easy here.
Sure.
You can do whatever you want. There's a house next door to mine that you can get, and you can bring your dogs. And I started feeling like I needed a change.
Sure.
So, it was a very quick decision to go to Mexico. I know there's a lot of street dogs there. There's a lot of people that try to help them, but they don't have the resources. And I was still trying to figure out like what direction to go, specifically with my YouTube channel.
Yes.
Because at that point I had blown up on TikTok, and I had 2.2 million followers on my first TikTok account. That happened very fast.
Yeah.
But then that TikTok account got taken down because I was posting a lot of skits, and again, I still didn't have a clear direction on how I was gonna go with it. And TikTok is very sensitive, so they would take some videos down, and so essentially it got taken down. And then I was trying to focus on YouTube because TikTok actually like made me realize there's a lot of interest in what I do.
Yeah.
And people were really excited to follow me. And so I started posting on YouTube, and I thought going to Mexico, rescuing dogs there, that can be content that I can create in addition to being able to help them network those dogs and helping them train and, show them other things. So I did that. And it was really good at first, just being in a new place, and you had all this vision, and you think things can go great, but then it's a very different country. So it's, it was very difficult for me to be there and for me to adapt.
Yeah.
So it only lasted about 2 months.
What part of Mexico were you in?
It was very deep into Mexico. It's called, oh my God. I won't be able to remember the name now, the name of it now.
Do you know what it's near?
It was far. It's like, I have a blank right now. I can't think of the name, but it's basically I drove through San Diego across the border, and then you go like 2 days driving into Mexico to get to it.
Wow. Yeah, it's very far.
I'll probably remember the name as we go.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I actually drove there with my 6 dogs, and I started doing what I said with helping the rescues there, and collaborating with them. I was able to help them send some dogs to the US, and we started filming. But then just the lifestyle of being there was definitely not for me. And I was already like, I was already realizing that, but I was there already. So I didn't, I was a little bit stuck. And then one of my dogs that was 10 months old, she had all her vaccines and everything. She ended up getting distemper.
Yeah, I saw
And
that. Sorry to hear about that.
When I say, like, people don't realize, like, I had know what distemper is, but it's not something that I ever heard of someone saying, like, my dog or my puppy died of distemper. So
especially not at that age, I feel like. Yeah. That seems like
I mean, parvo is way more common, like you hear puppies all the time. But distemper, especially, I have one that was younger than her.
Yeah.
So the fact that this is the one that's like a little bit older, like 10 months old, completely healthy. There's 6 dogs, and then all of a sudden one is sick, and she's just like losing balance. It was just a weird thing.
Yeah.
And then, we had to take her to like a couple of different vets, and the third vet is the one that actually like found out that she had distemper. And it was a weekend that this all happened. So by the time that they found out, they pretty much said, it's like, it's a 50-50. We cannot guarantee anything. There's a lot of things we can try. Yeah. But there's a lot of damage already done anyway. So even if she makes it, there's a high chance she's going to have, severe, like, long-term side effects.
Yeah.
So we tried for a couple more days, and then she ended up passing away. And it was just like, it happened really fast with that distemper thing. And so when that happened, I started, to really feel like, okay, so basically I put everything that I can possibly be doing, because because I had traveled before, and I know the demand for my training out there. Like, whether in person or in videos, like, everywhere I go, there's a certain way that people look at me and they approach me. The moment that I handle a dog, like, I could be just anywhere without a dog, and then there's someone there with a dog, and they handle me the dog, and immediately people around seem to be attracted to that. There's a way that I communicate with the dogs, and that they respond, that's very attracting to people. So I already know that. I just sometimes haven't focused my full time and energy into doing that. And so with that dog, Priscilla, passing away, which essentially, I have had different dogs. A lot of people also get confused with that. I have a lot of dogs. They live with other people. So when I started, I told you I had up to a few dozen dogs of my own. So they're all there, they're all alive, but they live with other people. As I downsized to having my own personal pack that they're with me full time. So when I moved to California, the reason that I actually had started with a new pack of dogs, because before California, I lived in a 10-acre property in the middle of nowhere. So my dogs were well trained. They moved with me to California. The untrained eyes, they can't see that the dogs may not be as perfect as I would like them. Maybe they're not as relaxed as I would like them. Sometimes also it opens the door for judgment, because, if you bring a dog that is not used to being in a huge crowd and they're still obedient, it doesn't mean that they're going to be as comfortable as a puppy that was raised in that environment.
Of course.
So I wanted to have the opportunity to start fresh with younger dogs, so that I could raise them in the environment that I'm currently at, which is a lot of people, lots of different environments that we go through every day. And so that's why I had started fresh. And so I basically was waiting for those dogs to develop into a fully trained pack, my new pack, so that I could do what I have done before, the whole off leash with the pack of dogs. And so when she passed away, she was like just getting started with the off leash. And then I only had 4 other ones that were a little bit older than her, and then the younger one. And so I really felt like, okay, it's kind of disrupted the pack, number one. And number 2, I was like, I don't want to bring another dog in. I don't have the time to start over with a brand new puppy again to have this dream pack. So that, because at that point, that's kind of like, that was my thing. That's how I could get my name out there to be able to build a brand and grow my, my views and all that. And that's basically when I started pacing around a little bit, and I, made this decision that it was time for me to start like really focusing on the training. Because up until then, I had never focused full time on the training. I was either distracted with my own dogs and just taking them out and being, having to be there to take care of them, or other animals, and then breeding and doing minimal training, which is literally the reason that everybody finds me is through the training.
Yeah.
So I decided it was finally time to focus 100% of my time into training, and I started promoting it right away that same week. And the other decision I had to make is that I knew it'd be hard to travel even with just the 5 dogs.
Yeah.
The amount of traveling that I scheduled right away was a lot. I was, this was back in January. So I started the first week of January of this year, and I have been to every state in the U.S. besides Hawaii and Alaska just this year alone. And I have repeated many different ones of them, like Texas and New York, like a few times already this year. Yeah. But I have been to every state besides Hawaii and Alaska. And then I went to England, I went to Canada, tried to go to Australia, but I had the wrong visa. That. Yeah. So, but, there's a lot of demand for me to go there. So I plan on actually venturing out to more countries next year to help people there.
Yeah.
But that's basically how I got to where I am now.
Sure.
In January, I just started focusing full time. And basically, my YouTube channel had 100,000 subscribers at the beginning of the year. Mm-hmm. So now I'm at like almost 1.3 million.
Yeah.
That's, over a million just this year. Yeah. And it's just, again, because I started concentrating on what matters, which is my training.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, you've had an explosive growth. So I think I was telling you, like, I've known about you since, I don't know, probably like 2014, 2015, somewhere around there, obviously. And you've went through so many, I've kind of seen just secondhand, right, some of the changes that you've gone through from like the facility kind of vibe, right? And then you transitioned to Mexico, and then when the dog daddy stuff started and everything. And so what are you, like 32, something like that?
31,
man. My mental math is pretty good. All right. And you got started super young. Like I was in a similar position when I first started my first training company. I was, I think, 19 years old or something like that, 18 years old. And the pressure you could feel sometimes of like the demand for your service, and obviously in your case it was more so because you had a lot of viral videos. I mean, I remember the first one of you walking the German Shepherds off leash just went bananas. Like it was all over the internet everywhere, and having that much demand for your services, being so young and not quite established with what it is you even want to do in the first place, but having that heart to want to like help everybody, it could put you in these like really almost like trapping positions where it's like, God, like now I'm forced to stay in this location and continue taking these dogs that, people are trying to put on me because I don't want them to go to the shelter. And it's like, but I got to keep taking these training clients. And that's got to be really, really challenging to deal with, especially on top of the fact that, you came here from Brazil, obviously. So, a lot of, I think one big thing that a lot of people don't even realize, because since, especially now, if someone finds me, like I'm all over social media, and that's like, pretty much I try to actually concentrate on just my own stuff. And that's been going on for years already, because I realize, like the people that get to know me, that follow me, like they're much easier to deal with. So like, I don't really need to venture out to other people's platforms or other forums, to post. But when I first started, like when that video actually blew up. Yeah. Was that like 2014, somewhere around there?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
But when I started posting on social media, like before I moved to the US, I never had social media.
Sure.
So I never got my first phone at all since until I was like almost 19. Mm-hmm. Before I ever had a phone.
Wow.
So I was definitely, I never was inspired to be on social media.
Yeah.
That was never a thing for me. I was always the last one to get onto everything. Like I was the last one to get on Instagram. I was the last one to join, every platform, always. I just always loved working with dogs. And so it took a long time for me to, just realize there's a lot of potential, of course. So for anyone who is trying to run a business, I mean, they would know like the smart thing is to be on social media.
Sure.
But I feel like that was a lot more pressure on me as well, because I wasn't used to social media, and it can be very toxic. And so of course it has the good and the bad, and I didn't really know how to deal with it in the beginning. So that was definitely another thing as well that was very scary. It was basically scary and very confusing to me.
Yeah.
And I really did not have anyone around me either to shed any light on, how it works. And so there was just a lot of pressure from both sides. I mean, when that video went viral, I had people from all over the world reaching out to me. They wanted me to sign for a TV show. They wanted me to sign to have my book. They wanted me to come to them. They wanted to be friends. But then there was also the other side as well. People who just were very skeptical of what they were seeing, because it was like this brand new person. Like, who is this person?
Yeah.
It's not that they can even look back and be like, oh, this is him when he was 10 years older. Because there was nothing. I was never posted on social media. There was nothing about me at all on any social media until I was 19. So it really, like, immediately within the first year, exposed to millions of people.
Yeah.
And also when, again, I was still not looking at it like, oh, I can do this full time. Because a lot of people, they take advantage of that first blowout, and they establish a career out of just doing social media, from that one blowout that they get for one post that they make or something. But that never rang a bell for me, so I was just excited that it was a lot of people that I was working with, and so that was good. But it took until recent years for me to realize that I could do this full time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, there's so many different topics and directions I want to go with this, but just some of the things you already discussed. So you mentioned, a couple of times, like the downsizing of dogs, right? Like you had, 12 and then you were 6 and then less and stuff like that. I think to a lot of people, that's a confusing concept to grasp, because it's like, well, they're your dogs. Like, how would you just, I could never imagine giving away one of my kids or this or that. And I could relate to that just from the standpoint and kind of help shed some light on how it's a little bit more normal than people would think. Because when I first started getting into dog training, I was very involved in like the competitive dog world. And I worked very closely with a breeder who bred Belgian Malinois. And in that sport world, it was so normal of when you hit a point where it's like, I either can't provide what this dog needs anymore, or this is just not the right temperament and personality that I'm looking for out of a dog to find a more suitable home for that dog than at that point, right? And it's like, I feel like people have a hard time grasping that and will like hang on to that point so much of like, you're such an asshole, right? Well, you got rid of your dogs and this and that, without looking at the reason why that happens is actually because you love them so much. You're trying to provide a better place for them to be, where they're going to thrive better and have a more suitable environment,
Yeah. So there's also another thing too that I feel like a lot of people don't realize it. A lot of people, they're limited to only what they know.
Sure.
And I think a lot of it too is them being selfish because of how they build a relationship with their dog, 100%. That they kind of force their dog to be a certain way, super in an unhealthy level attached to them, where the dog has anxiety when they're not around. So they 100%. Feel like, oh my God, I could never imagine my dog suffering when they are away from me.
But that's a good point.
The people that get dogs from me that, are a little older, they know like these dogs, the way that I raise them, and they're so exposed to different environments and different situations all the time. The dogs that are going to go to a new home, they go through like a preparation period where, first of all, the relationship that I build with my dog is very healthy,
of course.
But they know when they're supposed to be really fully super engaged with me, versus anxiety and unhealthy attachment where they cannot be away from me. My dogs don't have that because of how I raised them. So it's not like that they're, not eating and looking for me when I'm gone, because it's really the way you raise your dog. And, and so I think a lot of people don't realize that. My dogs, they go to a new home. It's like they adapt extremely fast. Like the same day people send me pictures and videos of the dog sitting on that couch and watching TV, like nothing happened, and it doesn't mean that they don't care. It's just that they're very confident. They naturally go, you're preparing the dog for success when you do that, because they go to a new home, they're not stressed out. And as long as they're in a good environment, they're going to adapt to that new environment very quickly. And naturally they're going to forget about, they're not going to be stressed out thinking about anything else, because they live in the moment. And I handle them to the new owner. People, build this unhealthy relationship with their dogs based on their own, like I said, selfishness, where they need that affection back from the dog.
And that
And a
like
lot of people don't see
unhealthy,
that.
like anxious behavior and stuff like that these dogs are displaying.
Yeah, they
Almost
need
like
the dog
they
to show a lot of
yes,
excitement for
yeah,
the owner to feel like the dog is happy
100%.
and that the dog likes them.
Yeah,
When I don't need my dogs to do that for me to know that they like me.
yeah,
There's many other ways that I can
yeah,
demonstrate that, and my dogs are very attached to me.
yeah,
But they're still very stable and they're very content. If I walk away from them, if I leave them home alone, they're not at all stressed out. If I walk away. So it just makes that whole transitioning much easier for the dog. So if anything, the way that I look at it, which is when I see comments like that, people, how can you get rid of the dog?
Sure.
It actually bothers me because the one that actually hurts the most is you letting go of that dog.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have a really strong attachment to a dog that that whether the dog is not a good fit, and you have to pick and choose, if you're trying to do certain things, like you said, selecting dogs for a certain purpose, or maybe even your environment may not be the best one for that particular dog.
Yeah.
So I have had dogs that didn't do well being in a whole pack situation, or like in the lifestyle that I live now with a lot of chaos around them, they just weren't happy.
Sure.
You can train them, they can tolerate it, but it doesn't mean that they're the happiest in that environment.
Yeah.
So if I make a decision, because I have made decisions of like the dogs that were the closest to me, that for me to let them go. So it has nothing to do with the dog.
Yeah.
It was like just for the betterment for that future.
Yes.
That I needed to select different dogs that would be best for the lifestyle that I live, that therefore would be better for the dog as well. Mm-hmm. And then it was such a hard decision to make. It's like you really have to prepare yourself to let go of something that you really care about.
Yeah.
And the dog's gonna adapt to the new home easily, but you're gonna feel like you may regret it the next day, and you're never going to be able to get that dog back. And you have such a bond with that dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like it goes both ways, but as long as, people understand that just dogs, there's a different way to look at it, not just like the way that you raise your dog.
Yeah.
Means that every dog is going to be the same way,
Yeah, and past that, it's funny. So like we do, board and train programs at our facility, and the owners will constantly ask like, "Oh, my dog's going to be so stressed out when they come there, this, that," and I always tell them, I'm like, your dog is going to do way better than you're going to do, because it really is. You are creating this in your head that your dog is going to be so anxious, but dogs are so freaking adaptable, and as long as when they go to that new place, they're provided with what it is that they need, whether it's a good routine or a good structure, they're so adaptable. I always used to say, like, if I were to die today and my dogs just went to some random person, they'd be fine in 48 hours,
Yeah.
So how much of that mentality, because like I feel like I never grew up with dogs, right? So like when I started getting into dog training was pretty much when I first got my very first dog. So I never had this association of them being like, quote unquote, like children, like a lot of these unhealthy relationships and stuff that people have with their dogs. I kind of always just saw them as dogs, right? And I love them, and they're fantastic, and they provide all these wonderful things for us, and they're wonderful, wonderful creatures, but they're still just dogs, right? How much of that mentality that you have do you think is due to growing up in Brazil? Because I've seen, traveling to foreign countries and stuff, or, talking to people in other foreign countries, just how different the relationship that they have with those dogs really is.
Yeah. I think, it really comes down to what you see around you. And I think, in Brazil, of course, like, dogs are going to be running loose on the streets. And even where I live, like all the dogs, they were just basically, they have their own little territory that they established around the house where they lived. But they weren't locked in anywhere, So my whole vision, my whole like understanding of dogs too it's different because of seeing dogs in different environments, like how they would behave naturally. So in Brazil, on this farm where we lived, like the houses were very spread apart. Like you would go almost a mile or more before you'd see the next house, and each house had their own little pack of dogs, whether it was like one dog or a whole family of dogs that would live there, and they were very territorial around that property. So if the road is too close to the house, for example, I remember like it was very common for you to drive, or anyone to drive, and the dogs would just follow, because there was no such thing as locking up your dog.
Sure.
So they'll just chase your car for miles and miles and miles. And especially if you had a certain routine where you'd go like every day or so, the dog would already know. But throughout that traveling that they had to do, if they had to go by a house where there was like all the dogs that were territorial of that property, for example, these dogs would have to take a cart and go into the bushes and cart around to not go too close to those dogs because they already knew that's another dog's territory.
Yeah.
And just natural communications in general. Like when they approach where we would go to, they may not approach the house because they know there's other dogs there that would be territorial.
Yeah.
They would chase each other. And, but that was a very natural thing. No one is intervening with that because that's all they know.
100%.
That's just all they know. I think in the US or in general, like what I feel with my clients is that a lot of the clients who they build this fantasy that of a lifestyle that they would have with their dog, and it's based on just what they saw in a movie. It's really like that. It's just like they see someone at the park one time with a particular dog,
sure,
and they're like, oh my God, I want to have a dog, and they only see that little small vision of them playing at the park, and they're not realizing there's a lot more to it, and you can't just. I mean, I have a lot of clients that they got a puppy, like a Doberman or a massive breed of dog. With this vision that they would just have a best friend. Yeah. They don't want to have without this dog. No, they want the dog to be literally love them and be their best friend and follow them off leash everywhere and run to the in a field with flowers and that's that's my own puppy. So they kind of like expect that they and I feel like most of us can relate. I think when you really put your mind to something and you really believe that's what you want and that's what you need and you really, really want it. Yeah. It's going to be really hard for you to snap your mind out of that and realize you can have some of it, but you got to make some adjustment. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people, they get a dog and they're not thinking like that. They're just stuck on what they envision is this beautiful relationship with their dog. Without having to do any work, without having to actually train the dog to be off leash, They just expect that if they love them and they give them a lot of freedom and they never tell them no, this dog is gonna have the utmost love and respect for them, Yes. And it doesn't really happen like that. But I think that's definitely a big problem. And then once the dog starts to run the house and become destructive and intimidating the owner, it's just a 80-pound, 100-pound dog that takes everything from them, they have no respect for them, then they become desperate for help and they start to realize they're going to have to force themselves to now do everything that they never wanted to do with the dog, which could be just as simple as making the dog do things. Yeah. And I have had clients like that. Like they never wanted to make the dog lay down and stay down because they're like, why would I do that? Yeah. They want the dog to have to be able to make their own decisions all the time. And you have to explain to them that realistically that just doesn't work. Yeah. Just based on how society's set up, and how dogs have to comply to certain rules for their own benefit, and for the owner's benefit, that doesn't realistic work. So, but I feel like that can be a little challenging sometimes to, to put it through dog owners' heads.
Yeah, I think the idea just that it's like social media and like TikTok in particular. I mean, obviously this better than anybody. Is like this echo chamber of just these trainers that are just pushing this completely baffling, unrealistic expectation and agenda on dogs, right? And it's like, right. I look at people like you, or we just had on the podcast yesterday. I don't know if you're familiar with American Standard Canine, who's another very popular TikTok trainer right now. But whatever. So they're just guys like you and him are putting out just real life dog training, right? Like, hey, this dog is going.
Well, I think also dog training is very complex.
Of course.
When you say what is dog training, How do you describe dog training?
Are you asking me that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think dog training in general is creating a communication system, right? And the ability to tell the dog yes and no in a way that they understand is kind of how I usually describe it.
Yeah. Because I feel like it's really hard. But if you say that, there's so many pieces to it. Like dog training, I would say building a relationship with your dog and being able to communicate with them and, getting them to respond. But it's too very vague, in my opinion. Sure. So for example, if someone sees me getting a dog under control, yes, and they'll say, that's not how you train a dog, I wasn't training the dog. I mean, I guess I could say I'm training
Sure.
it because it's learning to respect me. So it's training the dog to no longer put up a fight.
Sure.
But it's not really the training that they are thinking that I'm doing, you know, which is to get a dog to like people. That's just the first step, is to get them where they can even be in a position where we can move on to other things. Because when you get a dog that doesn't care about food, they don't care about anything, and they tried, you know, all these different approaches that people would recommend, like removing them from the situation. But what if a whole year goes by and they can still never be more than 10 feet to a dog? Oh, respect your dog's space. That doesn't work. What happens when you have to go to the vet?
Sure.
You know, what happens when the dog gets injured, gets an infection? There's literally so many things. What happens when you have to have a family member move into your house? What happens when, you know, your neighbor is intimidated by your dog because the dog is like trying to hop the fence all the time? There's just literally so many scenarios that I think a lot of people watching videos, they don't realize that people have real lives, and everybody has a little bit of a different lifestyle. Yeah. And so, you know, that definitely, like, I think that's the best way to explain that there's many different ways to train a dog. Yeah. Sometimes some methods are not going to work as well. And then sometimes the dog does not have the time for, even if the method would work, like maybe if it took a year, maybe if that would even work. But sometimes, you know, people don't have that much time. Most of the time they don't have that much time, because a lot of times when people come to me, they're very desperate for reasons, like I said, you know, relationships. They cannot have that partner moving into the house because the dog does not get along with anyone. Even after a whole year of them trying, the dog still doesn't get along with other people. So the owner needs to learn how to manage that dog, how to get them under control, so that they can show them a whole nother way that the dog is not able to see on their own. And no matter how much you try, like I said, because anyone that have a difficult dog, you know, they would know this. You can try something for a very long time. The people that come to me, the dog just didn't start showing aggression just yesterday. The majority of the dogs I work with, sometimes they have literally been 14 years of that. And they have already isolated them. The dog hasn't been going out for years, but then now they have a boyfriend with a young kid moving in. So it's either, you know, they completely, which, you know, some people may say like, oh, then don't move in. But you know that's not
that's unrealistic.
Especially also when there's a proven way that does work. So if the dog is going to be a little more stressed out with a certain approach, but it's short term, and then it solves, you know, this big problem that that the family is having, the dog is having, then like, how could you say no to that?
No, I 100% agree with you with all that, you know, and that's exactly the point I was trying to make. Is you can call it training, you can call it getting them under control, we could call it whatever we want to, but the fact of the matter is there's ways to go in and take those seriously inhibiting behaviors that the dog is displaying and just get them to a place where they're not creating these roadblocks.
So the other thing too is like very important to point out, if you have a dog, especially dogs that are really aggressive, it doesn't, you know, training does take time. That's why people, the training takes time. It doesn't work like that. Yes, you're right, but you're also wrong, because I'm not saying that the dog is fully rehabilitated after training session. I'm just teaching the owners how to keep them under control,
of course,
safely walk them around, so that they're not this, you know, beast that is dragging them and completely out of control, that, you know, it's going to hurt someone. So the first step is to make that dog more manageable, because even if the training doesn't really happen where they can rehabilitate the dog on their own, at least they have the dog more under control now. And we know that that's going to, you know, putting a muzzle on them, just having a way to restrain the dog a little bit better, so they're not being dragged around and the dog is doing whatever they want to do. So, you know, that's definitely, and of course, those dogs, in my opinion, they need to be stopped right away.
Of course.
Because if someone is being dragged by their own aggressive dog and they can't take them anywhere, the dog is, you know, trying to jump the fence, the first step is to teach the owner how to keep the dog under control, to at least prevent the dog from causing, you know, more damage. In the meantime that they're being trained to actually lose those fears, or, you know, whatever triggers that is causing them to be aggressive in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree with you. I think people have a false perception that when they see a 60-second video of, like, you know, getting a dog under control, that they just think it's done there. You know, it's like, well, we got it here and we're done. The dog is fine, as opposed to, okay, we got it under control. Now we teach the skills we need to teach to provide the structure so that we could stop this stuff from the dog from wanting to do this stuff in the first place, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's why, I mean, I'm very confident in, you know, my audience and my clients. Because I have a very high success rate with them. And obviously the reason for that is because there's always a lot more to it than just the 6-second video.
Yeah.
And I'm not, maybe some people get the wrong impression. I don't try to at all make it look like it's done in 60 minutes as far as like the dog is fully trained after that, but still no one could approach those dogs. No one could handle them before. No one, there's just so many things, years of trying different approaches. So every other suggestion that would be out there is just irrelevant because it didn't work for this dog. So I'm just getting them, to be under control. And those owners, they know that. And then people that continue to come to me, it's also because they know that. They also can relate to that because they're struggling with their own dog. And I have many people that, have taken a long time before they decided to come to a class, and they tried everything else first until they realize like nothing is actually working. And they continue to see all these other videos and all these other people getting help, and so I have enough people like that now that I don't really have to be like, I would say, worried about people who misunderstand, the video. But on the other hand, it is still pretty sad because I feel like most of the people, they really are confused. And the reason that I know that is because of the people that come to me, and the feedback is like completely different. It's clear for them to understand. It makes sense from beginning to end to them. And the masses of people that like come around me, they get to see that, and and based on that feedback alone is what keeps me going. It's just like, okay, if they go home and I get a feedback like a week later and a month later, it's constantly like people in the comments saying, that's not how you train the dog. I bet it's going to be the same way. But in reality, it's not. So, because they think that I just held the dog, made them stop, and then gave it back to the owner and tricked the owner that the dog is trained. And it's really not that at all. There's so much more. There's so many details. I teach my clients how to pay attention to the entire dog's body language. I teach them how to deal with, even in a single group training session, I teach them how to deal with everyday situations. If a dog runs to them off leash, if people try to pet their dogs, by surprise, as well as how to communicate with their dogs. So there's so much more. I teach them about the, safety measures that they should take, such as muzzles and different things. And I get them to feel comfortable and then also confident. Because a lot of times just people, it doesn't even matter the size of the dog, but they could have a 10-pound dog that they're completely overwhelmed by. And they, the way that I explain to my clients lately is that they give the dog way too much power, and they make them this much bigger monster that no one understands, that's unpredictable and scary. And then the owner becomes insecure because they see their dog that way. So once they learn that they can, with the right tools and the right techniques and putting the muzzle on, they can control the dog, they can communicate with them, they can keep them under control and calmer, and they can keep everybody safe around them, it gives the owner more confidence. So then, they see them as just this little dog. It's just a little dog that I can put a leash on and I can communicate with it. Which before they just didn't know they could do that. So that's, by teaching them that, it really, they leave my classes with more confidence and they feel like they are equipped to be able to handle the dog.
I think the confusion thing you mentioned is so big too. Like, I mean, I couldn't even imagine being a new dog owner in like today's climate. I mean, there's just so much conflicting information out there, and especially when you get into like, there's the one side, like, like guys like you who are just putting out like, hey, this is what's possible, right? You could actually see it. And then there's the loud minority, I kind of call it, of people that are just doing absolutely everything in their power to try to shut that down, but not showing what can be done. And it's like, you don't want to feel like you're the bad guy. You don't want to feel like you're being mean to your dog or anything, and like what everybody's basically accusing you of. But at the same time, it's like, wow, like I want that, right? Like,
well, it's also, it's pretty crazy because, like you said, I think that's two sides, for sure. But it's actually funny in a way because when people start, I personally don't know anyone who went from a trainer who is more balance and use methods to actually get the dog under control to then be like, oh no, I'm only going to go to positive reinforcement. It's definitely more people switching to the other side because we know it works better. And again, it would kind of go back to what I said about, having to get the dog under control right away. It's like all those approaches with using like stuffed dogs to see if your dog is reactive. Like, so many clients come to me and they are so amazed with like how quickly that dog, and I'm not even talking about like, some dogs are more difficult.
Sure.
But there's a lot of these dogs that these trainers won't, because they want to use a slip lead, they want to use a prong collar. There's no, firm, nothing on the leash to communicate with the dog. So they, even after months, they're not able to get this dog to approach another dog, even when they're very mildly reactive.
Yeah.
And so when I can get them playing in a single day, it's like amazing to the owners.
Yeah.
And then they'll tell me like, oh, the trainer used a stuffed animal. And, the way to look at it is like, there's a couple things that can happen there. One, the dog is going to realize it's not a real dog.
Yeah.
And then it's not going to be reactive. So the owner's going to, it's getting better, but they still can never get close to a new dog.
Yeah.
So that's going to go on for long enough until they realize that. Or number two, you can actually make the dog more reactive because it's just like this stuffed thing standing there that looks weird to the dog.
Yeah.
So it could also trigger them to bark at that more. But I don't see ever how it actually worked to get them closer to a dog.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe as like a one-time thing, but then you still have to go close to other dogs because actually when I train dogs to be okay with other dogs, there's so much more with involving the other dog, like the dog that we're using to be around the dog that we're working with. We want to see that dog doing different movements, laying down, standing up, running around, barking. I know for a fact when I'm like, reintroducing a dog to new dogs after they have been reactive for a while, they can warm up to a dog that's just calmly sitting there.
Sure.
But the moment the dog moves, they get startled and they start to bark at that dog again.
Yeah.
So they need to be comfortable with the dog, slowly. Of course, gradually, but we're going to get to a point where the dog is pawing at them and trying to play with them, because all those things are going to be new triggers because the dog is not comfortable, being around dogs.
Yeah.
So all those normal body language is going to be intimidating to this dog.
Yeah.
And so, but like I said, I feel like more people definitely do realize. So we can only do what we can do is we just continue to put it out there, showing the feedback of all the owners and showing that it's possible. At the end of the day, people have to make their own minds. But I think the only reason that people actually go for positive reinforcement is because it sounds amazing.
Of course.
If it was really possible, why do we want to use any type of force? Why would we want to use any type of correction if it could just sit on the ground and throw a couple of treats, And then let's get into that a little bit, because that's another thing too, like, positive reinforcement, even for the dogs that it would work. Like a more mild dog that, if people that do warm up to people, let's say there's some dogs that do warm up.
Sure.
If you sit on a chair for a couple of minutes and you throw them treats, they get to like you, and then boom, it's done. They're no longer reactive. Even then, it's most of the time not realistic to use that approach. And this is how I explain it to my clients, is that it's only realistic if you're going to try to get that dog to warm up to a specific person who's going to take the time to do that.
Sure.
That makes sense. But to really change the dog's mindset that they're not supposed to be reactive towards everybody that they meet, you don't have enough time to be able to imprint in the dog's mind, because every time that you go out and your dog is reactive towards someone, that just moves away from them because they're not helping you. They don't have treats. They don't have the time. They're not interested in helping you.
Yeah.
Now they moved away. Your dog barked at them. They think, they moved away because they barked at them.
Yeah.
You're kind of setting you back. So you can spend all day getting people to help you. Your dog's going to warm up to those people, but they're still going to be reactive to everybody else that just pass by and don't take the time to use the approaches that you're trying to use. So it becomes unrealistic.
Yeah.
So if you really want your dog to comply, and it's not that you have to be harsh either. It's not that you have to use severe punishment, but a little bit of pressure can completely change your dog from being reactive. And then you can go ahead and start giving them treats, and the pressure actually is going to be less and less and less. I'm talking about a lot of, sensitive, reactive dogs that are not like really necessarily like a hard to handle dog. Yeah. Just an easier dog. But a lot of dogs are like that.
Yep.
And so, but the only reason that people go to this approach of trying to not use any correction is because it sounds so nice. It's just, it's, and maybe some people are really stubborn. They really will go like years, and I think also, of course, they get brainwashed by the fact that this is the fair way, this is the right way.
Yeah.
You're being, you're doing the right thing by your dog. And in reality, they're not, because they're limiting the dog.
Yeah.
Just so many things.
Big time. As far as you were saying, the method of, having somebody let the dog warm up to a person, I always tell everybody, like, there's a big difference between your dog deciding that somebody is okay versus you telling your dog that somebody is okay, right?
Yeah. And I call it keeping the dog in a bubble. I do, keep them in a bubble. It's like, as long as you don't approach them with a hat, or you don't approach them fast, or you don't run, as long as you don't sit down, stand back up. And then people sometimes, they really want to force that onto other people as well, and if realistically, like, think about it, you're going to go out, you're going to run into all types of different situations.
Of course.
So it's just not realistic to let your dog decide. It's very important. That's exactly what I tell my clients. Like, don't let your dog decide.
Yes.
Because when you're letting them decide, you're keeping them in a bubble, because, well, they're going to choose to be reactive most of the time because you already know they're a reactive dog.
Yes.
And then if you avoid all those things that are triggers, you're keeping them in a bubble, and they're very limited to what you can do with them. And if they, usually they have already come to me at this point. So I'm telling them, if you came to me, you're looking to do more with your dog, So that's what I can tell you. It's like, don't keep them living in a bubble and limiting them, because you're allowing them to make their own decisions when they don't know how to make the right decisions yet. So you got to teach them first, and then you give them a chance to make the right decision.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. So speaking of training tools and stuff, what's your opinion? So I see you use prong collars a lot, muzzles a lot, things like that. Do you use e-collars ever?
No, I don't use e-collars.
At all?
No, never used them.
Okay. Any reason for that? Just because you don't need them, or?
I'm personally a big fan of the prong collars, and the way that I explain them to my clients, I think everybody uses them a little bit differently.
Sure.
I find that, like, my clients become very comfortable. A lot of them, they come to my class, they already know, but they still really think that maybe their dogs don't need it. And I explain to them right away, it's not a matter of even needing it. We're not putting it on your dog because your dog is more difficult than other dogs, or more aggressive. It's really, there's many different ways to use it also for different dogs.
Sure.
But most of the time I'm using it for guidance. And I show them how they can actually use the prong collar with very little pressure, using like 2 little fingers to communicate with the dog and guide them by using the right fit and the right brand for that particular dog. I also don't stick with one type of collar for every dog. I definitely switch it up. That's just the way that they designed a little bit different. They send signals to the dog a little bit differently. And so you can, by using the right techniques and the approach and guiding the dog, I use it more for guidance than for correction.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll get a dog that is extremely aggressive that already has a prong collar on. So the owner will pass the dog to me already with the prong collar. But most of the time, I would never put the prong collar on the dog until I actually have them already under control.
Sure.
So I'll use, at the most, I slip lead until I get the dog to stop trying to bite. And then I slowly introduce them to the prong collar, because I like to get the dog conditioned to the prong collar and comfortable with the prong collar. And I explain it to my clients all the time. The prong collar is going to, create restrictions. So the dog is going to feel restricted, and some dogs don't like that because they're used to a harness all the time. So now they feel something that does get their attention. It sends them a lot of signal. With a little bit of pressure, when it tightens around the dog's neck, it's going to send signal. It's not pain. For dogs that calm, especially, they're not forcing against trying to bite or anything, they're going to respond very easily to the prong collar with very little pressure. So you're using it more as a guidance tool than a corrective tool. And I really feel like it's also the dog, it builds engagement. Because you're constantly getting the dog's attention, because it sends them signal. You're reinforcing commands like sit, for them to stop. You're able to reinforce the heel. You're able to reinforce turns and many different things. But you're constantly keeping the dog following directions from the leash. Therefore, it builds more engagement because the dog gets conditioned to always taking directions from the leash. So the owners, my clients, they see it all the time, putting the prong collar. So it becomes something that they definitely are really interested in using. And then the e-collars, it's not that I'm against them. I know trainers that use them. I just don't get the same. It's much easier to be confusing to the dog.
Sure.
Unless you really, really know what you're doing.
It's much less personal,
Yeah, I think the prong collar is more personal. It's like the prong collar is more, the dog knows it's coming from me.
Yep.
Versus the e-collar, I know you can condition the dog to know that as well.
Sure.
But also, there's many different reasons too. I get really good results with the tools that I use. I wouldn't want to switch that. And then I feel like with a prong collar, it's unless you have a long time to work with the dog and the client to get them, on the same page with how the collar works and getting the dog conditioned to them. I think it takes more time to get the dog conditioned to it.
Yeah.
On average, like for most dogs,
Sure.
than a prong collar. I wouldn't have enough time with the style of classes that I do.
Yeah.
Number one. And then, like I said, just much easier to confuse the dog. And I feel a lot of dogs, like they can be under control really quickly sometimes with the e-collar, but it's more because they are like scared of the e-collar.
Sure.
At first, over time, of course, I know they can get conditioned to that. And it really takes someone who takes the time to use it properly to communicate with the dog, again, just like similar to the prong collar.
Yeah.
As a guiding tool for the dog. But
that makes sense.
I feel like the owners would probably be able to, some of my clients, they probably would be able to get the dog under control faster with the e-collar, with some of the severe cases that I work with, but they would have no control over the dog without it. And it would be really confusing for them to use both as well.
Yeah.
So I tell them, I don't really use them, I'm not against them. Now, there's a situation where if a client came to me and they had a very high strung dog, maybe they have disabilities, they don't, they cannot really use their hands really well, and they really need something to just be able to control the dog better, I probably would recommend them to go to a trainer who specializes in that.
Sure.
So I would help them get the dog under control. I would do a lot of training with them, and then they can go to get specifically trained for the e-collar.
Yeah.
I just choose not to even get involved with it, because also, back then there was a lot of speculations where like I use e-collars to control this dog. And even with the prong collar, my clients know I don't really use the prong collar to get the dog under control.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you watch my videos, the dogs that have the prong collar on when they're aggressive, they already had the prong collar on.
Yeah.
Every other dog, they start without it, and then I put the prong collar after I have them under control.
Yeah.
So it's not the prong collar that's making the dog submit to me at all. Because that would be traumatizing to the dog if they're not used to having the prong collar on. And unfortunately, I do have some clients that I tell them don't switch anything that you're using on your dog until after I get there.
Yeah.
And sometimes they put the prong collar like the day of the group training.
Yeah.
And also you can definitely see a dog that's more stressed out with it, or even frustrated because they just slapped the prong collar on. And sometimes I don't know that, I have a class, I kind of have to go dog by dog pretty fast.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And, I have a lot of respect for, like you were just saying, like if you do see somebody who you think would be a good fit for, referring them out to somebody who does e-collar training and stuff, but that makes complete sense to me. Yeah, I remember way back when that first off-leash German Shepherd video came out, I think one of the big things everybody was saying was, oh, well, he uses e-collars to control these dogs. And it's funny that like you've never even used them.
It really stemmed down from a couple of things. One is that all those dogs before I got them already all full grown. There was one dog that I got as a puppy out of that whole pack. So every other dog had no life experience at all. They came from living in kennels for the first 2-3 years before I ever got them. And they had no drive. They were more laid back because of that. They were limited to just being in a kennel and literally just that. And so when I did a lot of the training with them and taught them to be obedient, they were way more submissive, displayed a lot more submissive body language. That was one huge thing. And then the other thing was that they had collars that were like dried up and they were like sticking out a little bit.
Yeah.
And they would call them antennas, and that was like an antenna or things like that. And then I guess the other thing that I was gonna say is I'm not against e-collars. I don't really use them. Like all my clients would know, I have never put a prong collar on any of the dogs I work with. But even though I'm not against them, I also now I'm like, if I really wanted to use it, I wouldn't care about what people say. Because I would have to have a reason to use it. I would have to be able to justify, using it. And again, it's not that I'm against them, but the tools that I use work really well for me. That's why I don't use it. But also back then I didn't want to give people that. Because it's, even again, what I said with the prong collar, people know that it's not just as simple as slapping a prong collar on your dog to have them behaving. Like more than half of my clients have been using the prong collar already before they come to me. And the dogs are either pulling on it or they're afraid of the prong collar, because you have to have the right type of prong collar, the right fitting of the prong collar and then using it, properly with the right techniques to get the best results.
Yeah.
So we know that, but I don't want just uneducated people commenting it's because they have e-collar. Anyone can do that with an e-collar, and it's not true.
Sure.
People cannot just walk their dogs off leash, especially in a pack, just because they put an e-collar on the dog.
Yeah.
It still takes a lot more than that. Which again, same thing with the prong collar. The dogs don't behave just because they have a prong collar. Of course, it makes it faster. Of course, it's a great tool for communication. Why would I not use it? But it's not for the reasons that people think. That the dog is just intimidated by it and you're hurting them. We know it doesn't work like that, and my clients know it doesn't work like that. But with the e-collar, I just didn't want to give people that, and because it's not true, and I don't want people believing something that's not true, and then feeling like they either gonna just slap up e-collar on their dog, number one, or they're gonna not get help because they think the trainers are just putting e-collar, and it's just as simple as that. And they can do it at home, when it's really not like that at all.
Yeah, definitely. As somebody who uses primarily prong collars, one of the common things we'll see is dogs come in that have been on prong collars, whatever, their whole life, or have been to trainers who have done prong collar work, and the dog just like gets seemingly like calloused up to it. Like they just don't care about the sensation, stuff like that. What are some common mistakes you see that people make that inhibit the long-term success with the prong collar?
Well, definitely. I think the two biggest things is using oversized collars, both in the sense of the links being very bulky.
Yeah.
Which the sensation. Of course, you want the tips to be rounded, but you want it to be a little bit thinner as well, because you want that sensation around the neck.
Sure.
You want it to close and feel the not puncturing, but literally sensation.
Yeah.
And when it's bulky and heavy, or especially if you use those plastic,
the star
covers at the tips, they will also take away from the sensation. And then if it's too loose, like too oversized on the dog, hanging low on the neck, which means the dog is just gonna get too comfortable with leaning against it, and over time, again, the prong collar is another more proof that it doesn't really hurt once.
Sure.
If you have the right collar for your dog, but in this sense, it's not gonna hurt, but if you're not yanking really hard on a dog, it's also not gonna get their attention either. Yeah. And you don't want to yank hard on your dog, and most people don't, so they just slap it on the dog, and it's just sitting there, and the dog gets comfortable with pulling against it. So over time, it's like they don't really see the prong collar as something that they have to respect. Now it can almost trick the dog into feeling like they have to respect it, because when you first put it onto a new dog, and you have the right size and the right type of prong collar and everything, that sensation is gonna deliver a message to your dog, like, I should slow down, And because they slow down and you release the tension, they actually get conditioned to like, oh, a little bit of pressure, I just have to do it is stop, and that goes away. So they get conditioned to actually not forcing themselves against the prong collar.
Yeah.
So I think the key is to not get them too comfortable with a collar.
Yeah.
By not using techniques of like a little bit of a tug on the leash, even though it's gentle, you still want to do a little bit of that, just to, when they feel it gets their attention, you reward them for that. It builds more engagement. The dog, there's a couple of things, of course, they learn to avoid that, because when they're pulling, there's that quick little tug on the leash. Number two, when they stop, they look at you and they feel accomplished as well, because they know if they're walking right next to you and they're not pulling against the leash, that's the best place to be. You're rewarding them. You're calm. It doesn't have to be with treats or anything. You can, but just in general, your body language and the dog knows you're happy. They feel accomplished, and so it helps build engagement. And that's I would say that's the biggest mistake.
Yeah. No, I would agree. Just intentionally using it. Like so many people, it's like they have it on, and it's just there's the same exact amount of tension on constantly all the time, no matter what they're trying to get the dog to do.
And then again, the wrong size of the collar. Also
big time. Big time. Cool. So why? So obviously, like you're, you've gained such a ridiculous amount of success, right? And you like seemingly are this pinnacle of like controversy from the standpoint of like there's people just like designated to trying to take you out, it seems like, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think that's the case?
Well, I think it started from the beginning. It started right from the beginning. I was very young, very new, and I got a lot of publicity right away. And I think well, within my clients, within the circle of people that I work with, they are always very amazed with what I do. They're always very like over the top impressed.
Sure.
So they could have gone to other good trainers before, but they still see something in me that stand out.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to realize that, but there was a lot of I never asked my clients to leave feedback. I never asked for, reviews, none of that. People like voluntarily are very excited to share that they worked with me.
Yeah.
And this happened right from the beginning. And I think when you come out, it's like, everybody's coming to you. I was on Cape Cod. I was still 19 and I was in more demand. I was already on the, the front pages of the newspapers. And I was just a brand new person who they saw as someone that just started training dogs and now he's taking over and he's tricking people because he has a pack of dogs and, whatever it may be that they put in their heads.
Yeah.
But right from the beginning, there was a lot of eyes on me and just critics' eyes as well, because all the breeders and trainers, they were looking at me like, who the hell is this person?
Yeah.
So I think it started from there, and I got a lot of very positive publicity in the beginning. It was all the way from just all the front pages of the newspapers, and the Inside Edition, and the Daily Mail, like a lot of that from the beginning. But even before that was just like the local news. I think it put a lot of eyes on me, and people weren't sure what to expect from it. And it really wasn't until they realized I was not allowed to have as many dogs as I had.
Gotcha.
And that was the first bad publicity I had. The biggest problem is I didn't know how to deal with it.
Sure.
I was just kind of like, I felt striked and numb, and I really didn't know.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of like, the animal control being out of my house. And then all the time I'm in this illegal business. I'm like, don't go to him. He's running an illegal kennel.
Yeah.
And that word to me now is very laughable, because I mean, I know people would do that if they were in my shoes today in different ways, because I only had 3 extra dogs.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, this bizarre thing, but I got a lot of bad publicity for having 3 extra dogs that they were not bothering anyone, but just because I was getting a lot of publicity,
they're
and the
looking
animal
for something.
Said, he's not allowed to have all the dogs there. They turned into something much bigger.
Yeah.
So the first negative article was from Cape Cod Times, where they used the litters of puppies that I had that would still have gone home, but they called it me running a kennel with 27 dogs.
Sure.
And so, of course, that it's shocking to people, like 27 dogs in a house.
But those are puppies,
reality,
most of them.
It's a lot of dogs.
Sure.
But not the same as 27.
Of course.
And then the other thing they did is I had a room that I used closet doors because they didn't have doors.
Yeah.
So I set up closet doors, but it was a full-blown room, and they called it me keeping dogs in a closet. So, the comments from that took over with like, he is running an illegal kennel with 27 dogs.
That are all in closets. Yeah.
Don't go to him. And that basically was the base of where, a hate page started against me.
Yeah.
The different people they were like running with that.
Yeah.
Because I only had good publicity. I mean, I have no criminal record. So
Sure.
I've never been arrested in my whole life. I have never been charged for any criminal anything. I, was inspected by every agency in the country.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that it's really ridiculous to think that people actually take the smallest things to turn into the biggest thing when it comes to me. It could be they literally would be able to pick like one dog that had to be rehomed after I did one training with it.
Yeah.
And say like, oh, he ruined this dog, and he had to, one dog out of thousands and thousands and thousands.
Yeah.
Because I'm very content with the success that I have, and the owner wasn't complaining about it. It's of course, if a dog goes back, no dog trainer can guarantee the owner is gonna have 100% success with after they're trained. But like little things like that, like I said, they'll pick up literally on the smallest things. I have honestly very cringy videos of my trainings. I can admit to that. When I look back, that I'm embarrassed.
Yeah.
And it's not.
You're talking like old ones.
I was doing. And I can explain exactly like where they came out of.
Yeah.
They're my own videos, by the way. They are all videos that I posted. I filmed and posted them. I think right in the beginning with the hype of like all this demand, there's of course it comes with the excitement. Oh, let me show them more. Let me show them more.
Yeah.
Because I'm confident in my ability to communicate with dogs and my ability to, just give good results. Mm-hmm. But during the hype, you can sometimes let that take over, and maybe the corrections were a little bit too much.
Sure.
Or not, on the right time. But that's about it, and I can admit to that. And those are very old um, like literally 7-8 years or more, that I would look back at a video and actually be embarrassed of the video. But it's, I posted those videos, and but besides that, I think again they picked on a lot of that, and false news. Like I said, the 27 dogs. I did not have 27 dogs and keeping them in a closet and running an illegal kennel. But then the funny thing is that I started to realize that people didn't want me to actually just get better. They really were looking for something to be wrong. And so from that property, I moved to 100 acres because I had so many people on my side. So someone that I actually worked with her dog invited me to rent part of her property with 100 acres. And I went to apply for a kennel license. My kennel license took, and this is 100 acres, by the way. It took 3 months, 3 different meetings to be able to get a license for 25 dogs, because people started harassing the neighbors, saying that I was going to move there and my dogs would be running loose and killing their animals. And none of that had ever happened while that happened now, but just that I would take over and I would become a puppy mill. So these were just things that they were saying to scare the locals from allowing me to have this license. And so so it became very clear that they didn't want me to just have a license and become legal. They wanted me to go away, So it carried from that. And then it was a very bizarre thing. They twisted a lot of things that I had posted on the internet. Just to give you a little quick example, like I would post a lot about every day that I was doing, everything that I was doing with my dogs every day. And I posted a picture of my puppies, a litter of puppies, how quickly they can get messy. So I showed a picture of like, this was literally 5 minutes ago, and look at them again, because they just ate. I have to clean it again. They took away the clean picture and they said, this is how his dogs live.
That's how they're staying.
And they came in person and showed that they were like, they had, the audacity to do that. So the next meeting, I had a lawyer who had to come up with like 100 pages, just proving everything that they said. The girl was completely embarrassed because like she didn't expect that someone would come and show that like they're lying, they're just showing things that it's not really that. They can post a skinny dog and then not show the true story that this dog has, they came back to me like that. It's not like that I starved the dog. And so anything can be manipulated. And there was a lot of that in the beginning. I don't know really what happened, but when the bad publicity came, I had also some people backstabbing me, which was really ridiculous. And I realized they wanted some attention because I had people that had only met me one time. They had left a 5-star review without me asking. They had left text messages saying how amazing it was. And then all of a sudden, like, that dog was scared of me. The dog was trying to bite me. The dog never tries to bite anyone. And it was very bizarre. And I realized, people really want to get attention. And I was getting busier. I definitely lost a lot of friends in the beginning when I was getting busier and things were getting out of control. If I wasn't responding fast enough, they thought they had a stronger relationship with me than maybe we actually did. And they became the strongest enemies. Like they just had completely horrible stories to tell, even though it didn't match with everything that they had said before. And they had no future experiences with me, so that doesn't make any sense. But when people put something on the internet, anyone can believe, and they put a good story out there. And so there was a lot of that. And so for a couple of years, that went down. And like I said, for a couple of years, I would say it was very difficult to deal with all of that.
I can't imagine.
It took a long time. And at one point, I was very scared of the negative comments. I was trying to block people, delete comments. And I was just afraid because it was embarrassing to have my strong supporters who hadn't seen anything negative to see such horrific things with, me killing dogs and me keeping dogs in the closet, to me running over people when there was just so many. There was so many things, literally so many things. And that was very scary. Just even though they were not true, it was scary to see people because I don't know how am I going to explain to people that didn't happen. It's just like, it was difficult. And so it went on for a long time. And then, I don't know, honestly, I think over time, I just get comfortable with it. I know there's a lot out there. I think there's just enough people that have been to my house, that have been around me, that know the truth. And, again, I have no criminal records. I have been inspected by every agency. And then it just comes down to, if you want to believe that, I have enough clients. And I mean, what more could I want? You know, like
Yeah.
the people that I need to be working with. And I also know how to reach people and educate the people that want to see the truth, which is by the things that I post. And so I kind of overlook all the hate now. I mean, I think no one is completely immune to it.
Sure.
But I literally don't focus on deleting comments. I don't read the comments most of the time, unless I post something specifically that I want to read. I completely ignore. I think I know, like, literally how much I can help people. I know how the good service that I bring to the table, and I don't need to prove that to people anymore. Like, there's enough word of mouth. There's enough people that have seen it. There's enough people that want my help, and they would pay thousands of dollars, and they would travel hours, and they would do anything to get my help, that I don't need to focus on the people that don't know better, and they, being negative with comments. And then if someone reads those comments and they choose to believe that, if really, and it happens sometimes in a small scale, but sometimes someone will be like signed up to my, very rare now, it's this, like I said, very small scale, but they'll be signed up to my class, and then they'll see a negative comment, and they won't come to the class.
Yeah.
And then they see the class occur, and they see the feedback of the other clients, and then they literally will message me like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I missed the class." Sometimes they don't want to admit, but sometimes I will have seen comments, from the client, and I'll see someone saying like, "Don't go to him," and then it's like they realize it's their own fault, because I'm not missing out on anything. Like like I said, one thing that gives me confidence is that I can post myself anywhere with a single dog, and I will have people around me asking me for help.
Yeah.
Or I can post a video anywhere and people want my help. So, I don't have to really prove myself to you. Like, I would love to work with people. I'm very open to everybody. I'm a very forgiving person. I'm very easygoing. But it'd be unrealistic, unfortunately, for me to sit there and try to defend myself through every negative comment.
Yeah.
And that becomes a full-time job. It becomes very unhealthy for your mental health. And, I have already done that before. So now it's really easy for me to overlook that. And again, just focus on the positive. It's just, I have a lot of really great things that I'm working on. I have already been stuck on, like, not focusing on the right things for a very long time. So for the last couple of years, I've only been focused on the things that matter, because I know my potential. Like I said, I know my qualities, and when there's like good criticism, I'm also really good at taking that in.
Yeah.
Sometimes people don't even realize it, but it's because they want the drama. They want me to respond, and I think they already realize at this point. Like, and I think most people, after you do social media for a long time, and if you get like a lot of exposure, there's like millions of people watching my videos all the time. So, between all the different platforms, TikTok and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, there's a lot. And so you kind of become numb to it. Like I said, it's just, I don't really focus too much on the comments. And if I do, I'll literally scroll to the comments, and I will look at the bad and the good together the same way. Nothing really sticks to me. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, it was really negative too, because people would call me, my friends would, "Did you see what people are saying about you? Yeah. I can't believe that person. Like, I was literally there. Why are they saying that? Yeah. I saw what happened. That's not what happened." And, at first I would like focus time on that. And then now it's just, they already know. They don't do that anymore, because you'll be calling me all day long about a comment. So call me when it gets 1 million views, and I will respond to it.
Yeah.
Because, it's like, the reality is, even if someone makes a post about me and they're getting like, a few thousand views, that's like nothing compared to the millions of views I'm getting. So I'm not going to give them more traffic and put energy into that. So that's kind of like, honestly, how I look at it.
Yeah.
If they get enough people talking about something that is worth me responding, because people are getting mistaken by it, and getting, the wrong idea, then I'll be more than happy to respond. But otherwise, it's just a bunch of people with an opinion. And just like I get the good, I'm also going to get the bad.
Yeah.
I really feel like I'm not perfect. And so like I have people that, maybe are over the top praising of me and all that, just like it is the other way.
Sure.
But definitely there's a middle ground that it is a little sad seeing that people are so confused.
Sure.
Like they really believe in what they're saying. And again, what we discussed before, they just don't completely grasp the whole different lifestyles and people that need help now, and the types of dogs that I work with, and the different ways that I use the tools, so.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and honestly, like I was even like looking at your comments the other day in some of your TikTok videos. It seems overwhelmingly positive right now. You know, I mean,
Yeah, it
obviously you're gonna
definitely
have the
has
loud
taken us.
minority, but like it seems like quite a few of the people are really seeing that you're actually out there helping people. You know?
Yeah, I think like I said, once you've really pushed, just keep pushing through. And I have posted so many training videos, so many, there's a lot of positive feedback from my clients. I think people start to realize there's a lot of people that they're not fans, they don't follow,
Sure.
and so when something is posted on an article outside of my social media, there's gonna be a lot more negative comments.
Sure.
And I think like people, like I said, they know that they get comfortable with that. So my audience, my clients, they don't come to me thinking that I only have positive feedback.
Sure.
They clearly know. They come from my social media. They know that's both. But I don't have to sit there and explain myself to them either.
Yeah.
They understand it's a part of the game. It's a part of the business of being on social media. So it kind of actually works in my favor as well. It's kind of sad to say because it's almost like they post so many things that if one thing is true and 9 are not, it all mixed up together.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, they become they're not a reliable source.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there's no like actual big articles out there that really reflect on like something super negative.
Yeah.
There's been some in the past with the breeding part which is a whole nother topic, which
Sure.
like moved on away a lot from the breeding.
Yeah.
It just put them in a very vulnerable position.
Yeah.
Anyone knows that, a puppy can be healthy today and it can be with parasites tomorrow or a week later. And I think, unfortunately, and again, saying I'm not perfect, but I do go above and beyond to prevent all those things. It's not like, I just didn't care or I neglected. But there was a lot of just little incidents of someone getting something that because they got it from me and I was,
in the spotlight already.
Light on me.
Yeah.
There was actually this positive light where they think like nothing could ever go wrong. I'm getting this amazing product, and they're not realizing that you're still getting a living animal.
Yeah.
And so the slightest thing that would go wrong, sometimes people would have very unrealistic expectations. They would want a very unrealistic ways of solving that, because I really do try to work with people. I have always been like that. But when it was really unrealistic and they would try to hold it above me, and then they would turn into something where, oh, let me just talk about it then, because you don't want to give me $3,000 and let me keep the puppy. I'm gonna go and post on the internet. And then they would do it, and I learned again not to let that affect me.
Yeah.
But it would definitely be a big toll, because it's like everybody can relate to that. They think, imagine if I got a puppy that got sick and I had to spend that much money, and a lot of times it's exaggerations. A lot of times it's like a puppy, you took it to an emergency vet because he had parasites, and you would charge $5,000.
Yeah,
like he could have called me
100%. Yeah,
but it really definitely gave me a lot of bad publicity from that.
Yeah,
from that side of things.
The breeding world as a whole, obviously we're not going to get into that, but like I just remember from the Malinois breeder that I worked with, just hearing stories like when you're dealing with like breeding dogs, and especially like maybe learning how to breed dogs or figuring out what your litter is going to be like, there's just so many things that can go wrong through that process that are out of your control.
Right. And I just had such a positive spotlight on me.
Sure.
And I was on the spotlight so much that, unfortunately, again, it put me even more in a vulnerable position.
Yeah.
Because I had people looking to target those things. And a lot of times the owners were not necessarily evil people trying to come for me, but because they would post and mention me, all it took was another trainer or a breeder to spot that and then say, oh, let me write an article about this, And so it really turned like very small things that could easily be solved, which happens with any breeder.
Yeah.
But it turned into this, I'm a monster who, takes advantage of people. And so I have moved on away from that a lot, just because I feel like no matter how much you put into it, how much care and precautions you take, because there's always the unrealistic people. Like I said, even if you were to refund them full, they may still be unhappy.
Yeah.
So there's always leaving a little bit of room to where there's nothing you can do. They're going to be convinced that the dog has an issue because of you.
Sure.
And so it's going to come back at me.
Yeah.
With the training being that, especially it's something that I grew up doing. I have been doing training my whole life. When I started training it professionally, which we didn't get a lot into that, but
No,
you know,
yeah.
it started fast, but
Sure.
it's because I didn't plan on doing it here.
Yeah.
But I actually grew up already training dogs. I had worked in a dog training facility in Brazil since I was 12. It's a very
Wow.
small one.
Yeah.
It wasn't a big thing, like I said, in Brazil.
Sure.
But there was this dog trainer who specifically trained like protection dogs and guard dogs for commercial properties and stuff like that. So there's a lot of German Shepherds, which is kind of how I got familiar with the breed and fell in love with the breed.
Yeah.
But I had been doing that professionally with him since I was 12 for a few years before I moved to a farm.
Yeah.
But I have, just always only been interested in working with dogs, and whether it's my own or a friend's dog, even though it wasn't like fully professionally because there was no career path like that really in Brazil. You would actually have to go to college and get certified to be a trainer and be able to like do the type of training that this guy did.
Really? Yeah.
To be able to stand out and actually offer service that would be anything worth doing.
Yeah.
But I worked with him. But then again, when I moved here, I wasn't planning on staying. I kind of came taking it day by day. My family just wanted me to learn English. I actually worked as a dishwasher the first year.
Yeah.
So I worked at a restaurant as a dishwasher. I didn't speak English. I had no dogs. So for almost the entire first year, there was no animals. My family, they basically convinced me to move here, to move me away from the dogs. They tried everything. They tried to put me, like literally you name it, they tried, like instruments, sports. They would try so many things. Nothing caught my attention. I would only be interested in dogs. They wanted me to be a veterinarian. I didn't really like school that much.
Yeah.
So they really didn't know, but they were willing to pay for college. My family had been coming to the U.S. for many years before me. I was the first person born in the U.S. So I had this advantage over them that they were like, this is the biggest gift you have that you don't realize. You have this opportunity. We came from a very poor family with my grandparents living like very poorly, to then being able to come here and then raise their kids to have a better future, which then my dad and my two aunts, they were able to go to college and get good jobs. And then they were able to be there for me to be able, to come here and have a place.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to go to college. Like I said, it's just, that was I felt anxiety and a lot of pressure growing up because they were not like forcing me, but it was a very constant topic of like, so what are you thinking, for different things, and they would come up with different things, and it just wasn't exciting to me, and I just knew I would be wasting my time if I did that.
Yeah. So
what happened was actually after I got my first dog, very quickly, that's when everything started.
Sure.
I almost felt like deprived from doing what I love to do. I got this first dog and I did so much training with her. It was all obedience, but she just knew so many tricks, and I would take her out to the pet stores. I would take her to the park, and it was how I was able to start connecting with other dog owners. And I finally felt like I found my place, because the way that people responded to even just that one dog, they were very amazed and they were very intrigued, and I was able to connect with them and talk to other dog owners. And so from there, you open the doors. And honestly, I love doing it so much, and I had no direction. Like I said, when people started like, oh my God, that's amazing, how you do that with your dog, and I would help them, they would literally charge me they would literally pay me like $20.
Yeah.
And I would spend the entire day with them. It was not,
yeah,
it was because it was such a new thing to me.
Sure.
To be able to like actually be recognized for something that I loved doing.
Mm.
And also because for the first year, I didn't even have a dog.
Yeah.
So now to be connected with people, and my family told me like, it's really difficult to have a dog in the US. You have all these licenses. You can't have a dog here and that. Yeah. It's very expensive and all these things. And so they really make it look like it was impossible to own a dog. Mm. So when I finally saw people that had 3 dogs, they had 4 or 5 dogs, people that had horses in their backyard, I was like, my family's not really telling me the truth. And I was able to connect with just people and learn like, how does it actually work here to have a dog? How does it work? And so it was very interesting. And I would spend, like I said, the whole day with them, just working, and it was a beautiful thing. And then word of mouth started spreading. Yeah. And very quickly, this happened really fast. Like after the first couple of months that I had that puppy, I actually ended up, so I lived in my aunt's finished basement. and they had a very, very regular schedule. So the way that this whole thing really like blew up is that I started getting more dogs.
Yeah.
So I started very quickly. I got one more dog. I think literally a week later, there was a third dog. And then a month went by, and then I made the biggest jump of my life because I was very limited at this point. Like I said, I still wasn't on social media. I was just starting on social media at this point, but I was very new to everything. I was still learning the language. I hadn't traveled much. I was living in a small town in Brazil. And then I go online and I buy these 2 dogs from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to be delivered to me to Massachusetts. And I do it on my own. I'm so nervous because they come into the house, you know, like it's my first time making that type of jump.
Yeah.
So they got delivered and now I have 5 dogs.
Yeah.
And so I had the 5 dogs, I would say for, I don't want to lie, so, you know, a month or 2. It wasn't a very long time. And I was taking them out. And at this point, I was already like, every time my aunt would go out for work, I would take the dogs out. I was out all day long. And I was doing enough training. And I had a little bit of money saved up from just working that year because I didn't have to pay rent or anything.
Sure.
So from working as a dishwasher, that would like be enough to keep me going. I had bought my aunt's old car at the time. And my family is like, they're really good, but they really wanted to teach me the ways as well.
Sure.
So they were, you know, a little bit wrong ways because they were a little bit too forcey with the college thing.
Yeah.
But they actually made me buy my own car from them, which was like my aunt's used car. They didn't give it to me.
Yeah.
You know, but I had a free place to stay. They were like very fair, but they also want to teach me the things they work, you know? So I do appreciate that too. And we have a really good relationship, but we're very different people. So we don't really, like, they're not really on board even now really with what I'm doing because I kind of like, I live here in California by myself, but it's all cool.
Yeah.
So my aunt would go to work. I would go out with the dogs, continue to establish myself with more dog people. And like I said, I was doing enough to get me going, you know, and to pass by money-wise. And other than that, I was just out with my dogs and getting recognized for like how the dogs were obedient to me. Yeah. And then what happened was I actually and it was a beautiful thing because I was connecting with people and it was such a like something that I had never experienced before.
Sure.
Because in Brazil, people definitely noticed me and the dogs and the engagement that I had with the dogs, but it was more like, oh, here he comes again with the dog. It's like Dr. Doolittle was my, you know, my nickname, or Noah from the Noah's Ark. Like that's what they would call me. And it was kind of like a funny thing. It's kind of like a, you know, like, I don't know, they would see it, but they didn't know anything else to relate to other than this guy is just crazy with animals, you know? Yes. And when I came here, it was like this, oh my God, like, how'd you do that? Like they were just, there was a different feedback that I had never seen before. Yeah. And so people started asking me to train their dogs and I started, and I'm someone, like we talked a little earlier, that is really difficult to say no to. Yeah. I'm like a challenge myself a lot. So I'm already with 5 dogs and my aunt only thinks I have 1. You know, she comes home, the dogs are quiet and obedient. If one little dog barks during dinner, because we had dinner together upstairs, I had to run down. It's like, oh, it's my one dog barking. And, you know, I was able to do it fine for a couple of months.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
And I was even boarding dogs. So I would board dogs for people like that I was training. And at one point, I remember I had like just 3 little dogs staying there. And one day I was boarding the dog during the day, pet sitting the dogs at my house. I think there was like two extra dogs, and and the dogs would run the house when she was not home. Yeah, and I would, you know, let them socialize around the house. And she came home early one day. Oh no! Without any warning. It was like literally the biggest shock of my life because I like my aunts especially, like I said, they came from having nothing. Sure. Their parents coming here, giving them an opportunity. So they have really good jobs. They have good careers. Yeah. But they are very much like by the book. Yeah. You know, they don't know how to run their own businesses. They don't break the rules. They follow things like very, very by the book. And so to see the dogs alone, or just that idea of like, you know, you have all just licenses that you need. You cannot have dogs in the house like that, and all these things. You cannot have certain breeds. When she saw the 7 dogs running loose in the house, there was like that shock, and they're very strict. Like they I don't know how to explain, but they have a way to intimidate me. Sure. Even though they're never physical, they just have a way to look at you like, what are you doing? Shit. You know, and it's like they're just afraid of. I don't know how to explain. But I remember that shock, and then she was literally like what are these dogs? And when I told them, I was boarding 2, but 5 of them were mine, she was like, no, you're joking, like get them out of the house. And she's like afraid. It's almost like this look of fear.
Yeah.
Like, why are these dogs here? Like, I don't know what to do right now, which I can tell you another funny story right after this really quick. It's kind of, my family already know that I have a habit of doing this.
Yeah.
So this is something that probably put her in a shock of like, oh my God, it's happening again, because I used to cry and bring new dogs home when I was very young and cry for my way to have the dogs.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a family with, getting off topic a little bit. My parents were divorced. I was the first kid. My grandparents had done everything to like try to be there for me because my parents were really young. They were fighting. I was in the middle of that mess. So they kind of always tried to like allow me a little bit more, because I was the first grandkid and I had a troubled childhood with my parents. So I would cry for a new dog and they would allow me. So this was back in Brazil. I would always come home with a new puppy and I would be 8, 9 years old and I would hold and cry until they allowed me to have it. And I always got in my way. There was not even one single time where they took the dog and took it away.
Yeah.
They always.
Isn't that what these dogs are doing to owners nowadays? What you were doing to your parents?
What is that?
Isn't this what these dogs are doing to owners nowadays? What you were doing to your parents?
Oh yeah, yeah. So they So then I have that reputation, right? And so my aunt, actually, that's the reason why they said no animals when I moved to the U.S. because they would try to move me away from that and go into college. She saw the dogs, she freaked out, and she basically she didn't know what to do. She ended up calling the animal control because she wanted to make sure that she's not getting in trouble for having other dogs. The animal control comes to the house and she actually says, like, actually, you're allowed to have up to 5 dogs. So like, it's not breaking any rules or anything. And she's like, no, only 1 dog.
Yeah.
And so that was 218 at the time. And, she wanted them gone right away. The animal control talked to her that, like, I would have to have a few days, a week or so to figure out what I was going to do with the dogs.
Yeah.
She couldn't force me to get them out right away. And it was very, like, we didn't really talk for a while. It was like, she's just in shock,
Yeah.
And I moved out. So that's when I moved out. And I talked to everybody that I had been working with that admired my work and told them my situation. I only had the car. I basically was like homeless when I first moved out.
Yeah.
I was like in the truck and I was in between like friends and, it wasn't necessarily easy. I had some bad incidents. I literally had a place where I paid the money in cash, went to take a shower, came back out. And the guy who's like the roommate, the owner of the house, literally looked at me like, well, when are you going to pay the rest of the money? I'm like, I paid you all the money. And I knew it. And just something was off. And I remember looking like underneath the newspapers on the floor and the money's there.
Yeah.
And so now, I'm moving out of there, but then having no place to go.
Yeah.
And, I had clients, I had friends, but I was still kind of felt like limited on who am I going to tell all this? Like I'm basically,
of course.
And I was not kicked out of my house. It was a decision that I made because I didn't want to comply anymore to that. I knew that I had finally found my path that I was trying for all these years growing up. I'm not going to go back and comply by getting rid of all the dogs and keeping one.
Yeah.
And then living under their roof and following their rules and never getting anywhere.
Yeah.
So again, there was a lot of back and forth with this. Eventually, I was able to rent a little studio with one of my clients who had like this old house that was divided in many different parts. And I got the little studio. This was back on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. And then from there, I started doing more training and, taking the dogs out more. Was able to move to the big apartment. Eventually, I had the full house. And then from there, I was able to move into a newer house, which is actually pretty new. I was the first person to move in there. And we had kind of like an unconventional mortgage because it was more like a contract to buy the house.
Yeah.
And that's right when I started with the problems of not having the license.
Yeah, that makes
sense.
Then
I jumped, like now I have this nice house, but no license and being harassed that I cannot have the dogs there. That went for a while, and I ended up having to walk away from all of that because I had too much on my plate to be able to follow through with like keeping the house and renting it to someone else.
Yeah.
Then I moved to the 100-acre farm.
Yeah.
And then I was there with 0 problems for a few years. But I also realized I felt like I stepped down because I was used to already having my own everything, my own place, Then I was kind of sharing someone's house, which we're still really good friends to this day.
Yeah.
But I needed my own space. And then I moved to South Carolina,
Yeah.
which was the first time moving away from the state where I had built everything from. So I had to start over.
Yeah.
There was a whole other big hit because moving to South Carolina, it definitely felt like, I honestly just say this really quickly. One thing that does make me proud of myself is that between all the hate and the all of these things, even having publicity really fast, is that most people would not survive it.
No, I would agree.
Even on a personal level, to be able to handle all of it, as well as on a business level, they would not be able to survive.
Yeah.
Because when I moved to South Carolina, I had no cell phone service for the first 2 years. I had to move on to using a house phone. I was in a very small town with 500 people. All my regular clients were completely gone. I had to completely reestablish myself. The mentality of people that is very different. It's in the South, especially in a small town. They're not used to really getting the dogs trained as much. So it took me almost 2 years to reestablish myself. So I was down to the ground. I was literally, nothing was happening. There was no business, and I didn't give up. And I kept pushing. And then slowly things started building up. Just people, actually, the local people realizing the difference between the dogs I had versus all these backyard dogs that was seen there, the type of training that I was doing, the benefits of training and being able to make the dog a little bit more a part of your life. And then I was able to completely reestablish myself, and I was striving. I had to do things differently. It was people sending the dogs to me to be trained from all over the country, and dogs being transported to them. And I did it. But then I also realized that was, I told you earlier, it was not how I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Just to be isolated on a piece of property away from everybody and having all the dogs there. And that's when it started as a traveling idea to start traveling again.
Yeah.
And the first stop was Los Angeles, and I had an opportunity. Everybody's telling me this is where you have to be.
Yeah.
Look at all this, the opportunities is endless. So I ended up making a decision that same week, I'm gonna move. And then within a couple of weeks, I found accommodations for all the dogs, and besides the 6 that I took with me. And then I moved. I had someone drive my car and my dogs, and kind of started over fresh. Left everything behind. I was so overwhelmed at that point, to be honest. Even though things were business-wise, things were already better at this point.
Yeah.
But mentally, I was not in a good place.
Yeah.
It was just, I just felt like I had to work really extra hard to basically just maintain what I had. I wasn't going up. And I realized it was being in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So I gave away all my supplies, literally thousands and thousands of kennels and collars, sheds that would bring you that I had bought, walking away from the house that I had a lot of money down, because I was also with the potential to buy as well.
Sure. So
we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, not counting the monthly fee, that I walked away from everything. So I would say literally one shocking thing to people that they don't realize, I literally have walked away from probably close to $200,000.
Yeah.
Just from not knowing what I was doing. That's just in down payments. Every time I moved, I left all my kennels behind. And I always bought new, retriever kennels, brand new, nothing, no cells, nothing, new. And then the houses, the sheds, like I said, all the supplies. And every time I moved, I started fresh because I wouldn't pay to move everything and not have a place to put it. I was moving to a different situation where things were differently.
Yeah.
So there was just a lot of, ups and downs with that as well.
Sure.
And then what I'm trying to get at. Yeah. So I moved to California, and
here you are now.
And then I had to start fresh. And even, and then finally started to learn. I feel it was really easy for people to take advantage of me in a way of having a lot of the dogs, because I was very much in their hands. I couldn't just move whenever I wanted, it was hard because everything was around the dogs and being able to have the dogs, having the right neighborhood to have the dogs. So I was very limited, and I felt very trapped in and lower confidence, because even no matter how well I was doing, I was still kind of restricted, because there's certain licenses that you need, certain property types that you need to have the dogs. And finally, when I moved and I had only even just 6, it's a lot, but it was like at this point, I had enough connections that I knew 6 is a manageable number.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to be homeless if I need to move out overnight,
Yeah.
and or whatever. Like it's always a little scary. I feel like unless you're really established on a property, like, and if you really plan on staying there, if you have like 20 plus dogs, but if you like at any moment, you might have to move,
Yeah. That's
and
a
I
lot.
kind of felt like that because I was unhappy where I was many times, but I was forced to stay there because I couldn't just pick up and move because of the dogs.
Yeah.
So I would, sometimes be there for years, just locked down, and just because I had the dogs there and I couldn't leave them there.
Yeah, definitely.
And then when I moved, there's another thing, like, it was like a year after I moved, because I don't have to post what the dogs are. And one thing that I learned, which is how I deal with also the negativity right now and the haters, and I know that there's people out there, out to get me. I'm very careful with like certain things, like literally as little as people knowing where I am, they can cause a problem from afar.
Of course. Yeah.
I mean, there's been situations where people called the security of a hotel where I am, just say that my dog is trying to attack them just because I posted that I'm in the hotel.
Yeah.
So I have been harassed until they realize, oh, this person is on social media.
Yeah.
And that's where it's coming from. And, it's like, there's no base on what they're saying, but people would do that. It's really bizarre that I became such a big target. I think going back to what we talked in the beginning, they never won from, me having the illegal kennel and me moving up, and I moved up and they're still there, like always trying to drag me down. They're looking and trying to drag me down.
Yeah.
And it's for the slightest thing that they can do to, even in their dreams, if I was to get kicked out of a place, just the embarrassment of like, oh, he just got kicked out, or for them to be able to manipulate that into something else, like his dogs did something wrong and that's why he's being kicked out. They do that. And so I have to be really careful about all these different moves that I make.
Yeah.
I usually, post after I have already left a place, and just, for those reasons. But when I moved, I didn't tell people where my dogs are, because there's also people have a reputation of harassing the people that have worked with me in the past.
Yeah.
I had vets that were very happy to work with me, and then they would become these evil vets just because they support me, And in reality, I was helping them more than they would ever be able to help me.
Yeah.
Because they're not endorsing me or anything. I don't ask people to endorse me. I don't need, especially when it's just like a local vet, I'm literally there helping them and they're very happy, but then they'll be harassed by people. So when I moved with the dogs that I didn't take with me, ironically, it took almost a year, but just some random girl on TikTok decided to make a TikTok video saying that the biggest highlight of the story is that I dumped my dogs from a U-Haul truck in the desert and the dogs were never found.
I remember hearing about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there was like this whole new wave out of the blue because things were peaceful. And there's like just thousands of people commenting, 25 dogs, where are the 25 dogs? And I tried, like, I was on a live, I remember, and like all these people come out of the blue because, the video has just hit. And so I'm like trying to respond, but also kind of like trying to look up where it's coming from, because I know when there's a certain wave of people, then I know
something
someone
happened. Yeah.
And I know whether it's like just one random person posting it, or someone did a big video that's getting a lot of views, because there's going to be a lot of relatable comments, about one certain thing. So I cannot miss that.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking, and then I found the video, and I'm trying to explain, like, it was kind of ridiculous, but everything I said is, oh, he's defensive, he's clearly lying, he wouldn't be, and it's like, he cannot win, you know.
No,
if you're talking about it, and it's like, oh, he's clearly talking about it, and he's lying.
Yeah.
He doesn't care if it's not true, and if I don't talk about it, then it's like, obviously he has nothing to say because he's lying. But it was like a very bizarre thing with no base.
Yeah.
The dog, it makes no sense why I would dump dogs in the desert that are worth thousands of dollars, that people know I have a reputation of selling them for really good prices. They're trained.
Yeah.
It would just not make any sense. There's no base because there's no dogs found. There's no evidence of anything.
So as I was reading about that, like earlier, their only reasons for like justifying saying it was just they didn't know where the dogs were. So they were like, because we don't know where they are, this had to have happened.
Yeah, and it's also like they don't know. They saw U-Haul trucks going to the property to pick up the kennels, as well as cars to pick up the dogs.
Yes.
And they assume the dogs were put in the U-Haul truck and taken off the property, but they never arrived to California. But I never said they were supposed to arrive to California. I never said they're on the way to California. They were never on the way to California. Why would they ever be coming here?
Yeah.
And simply they don't know where they went, which they went to different people. They were taken off the property and they went, to different houses from people that had dogs from me that I had built a relationship over the years that would then house these dogs for me to be able to be in California.
Yeah.
And so it's, again, very baseless, but it makes a good story and people ran with it. And, it's one of those things like, how can I prove that it didn't happen?
Sure.
I mean, I guess I have tried and people could say like, oh, just show where the dogs are and they'll be happy. They're going to say those are different dogs.
Yeah.
Because they say 25 dogs. They don't know what dog they're talking about. They
That's
have
true.
no idea what they're referring to. So if I show up any dog, they're going to say,
that's not the
that's
one.
not one of the 25. So literally, unless someone can tell me, like, I don't see a way where I could actually prove, because I have text messages from the people that where the dogs are at. I FaceTime them. There's tons of pictures back and forth, but there's no way to identify all those dogs were regular black and red German Shepherds.
Yeah.
So there's absolutely no way for people to, identify them through photos or for me to prove that those were the dogs. And also, there's not 25 dogs either.
Yeah.
Like, they just put a random number because a lot of the dogs had already moved. So it really came that like 15, probably around 15 dogs that were then moved to just different friends, just stay with them. So everything is, bizarre. It was kind of funny at first, but then that lingered on for like a couple of months of like 25 dogs, which, social media, they don't take your platform down because of stuff like that, but because I was posting certain videos that were going under the radar as graphic content and dangerous activities.
Sure.
Which is pretty much the only reasons the TikTok got banned, which then is again another thing. They banned him because he's abusing dogs, and there's nothing to do with abusing dogs at all. Actually, none of the videos were ever taken down for any type of abuse or neglect.
Yeah.
It was the content that I was posting was like the skits that I was posting, and not even training videos back then. Which again, I think everything happens for a reason. I could be really upset and depressed, and instead I was like, people really like my content, like. And I'm going to start over. And I started focusing on posting the training videos, which now I'm back at like, again, 1.2 million on both platforms on, TikTok and YouTube.
Yeah.
And I'm way more better branded because it's all dog training content.
Yeah.
Like before, people just knew me as like a dog trainer because of my own dogs, but they didn't really know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And then now I have all these different services, like with the group trainings, and I do like the 3 days with a client, but it's all featured on social media with my videos. So it kind of like, it motivated me to also post on YouTube, which is a much stronger platform.
Yeah.
And I'm growing on there, consistently right now, even faster than TikTok. Mm-hmm. And I was able to reestablish my TikTok, and I have no strikes on my accounts. And so it's like, it works. Like I said, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So, okay, so I have one last really quick question here, because this is the one thing everybody has consistently asked me to ask you that has wanted to be on. So how did the brand of the Dog Daddy become? I mean, like, it seems like you came out of nowhere, just dressed head to toe in Versace and Louis V and stuff, and it is so iconic, right? It's the one thing everybody sees. How did that come about?
Well, I think, again, when I first moved to the US, I had no direction in any aspect. Like, I grew up where I didn't have to care about what I wore at all. Like, I had no style. Sure. I would, like, it was just really crazy, and I didn't care. There was not something that I had to, like, be concerned with. Mm-hmm. And then, things go, and I don't know. Okay, one thing that I'm gonna admit, and I think like maybe some people are like born with this. It's a very natural thing, so don't hold it against me. But I always like to stand out.
Sure,
like
that's normal.
In school, not college, but like in high school, in school in general in Brazil, one time I pierced my ears like all the way, and this was a very conservative part of Brazil. The kids are out in the country; they don't even have guys don't even have earrings. Yeah. And I did 6 on the ear. I brought a mouse to school one time, like a little hamster. Yeah. Just I wanted to stand out, to be extra, always from the beginning. Sure. So that was like something that I think just making it more fun. Yeah. It's what really, it's like that excitement of, you choose something that everybody's gonna look at it. It's like, and they're gonna talk about it. It's just exciting. It builds up this engagement. Yeah. Not only on social media, but just in general. So I have always been like that. And so even when I was starting out, even though I didn't have a style, I would do things like whether it was like, shortless walking the dogs, or like, I don't know, there was just a lot of, I would wear something that, just, it would stand out.
Sure.
But I didn't have a direction. The name thing was very difficult. A lot of people were suggesting. So I went to different names because none of them were catchy. It didn't feel like that's me, but I needed something. So it was like the shepherd guy. The most one that really stood for a little while on social media was like Augusto, the dog trainer.
Yeah.
But that to me is so boring.
Yeah.
It's like, it just felt like, what is that? A lot of people do that, and there's nothing against them.
Sure.
But because I'm someone that really likes to stand out, they're just like Augusto the dog trainer. It wasn't it.
Yeah.
But it was that for a long time. And then on TikTok, when TikTok started really blowing up last year, and I was getting like 100 million views a month. I was, everybody out in public was like recognizing me. I had already at this point with TikTok, I started wearing louder outfits and more like tracksuits.
Yeah.
And I think I saw a lot of the people like with the, the dancing videos, and, you kind of watch more, you learn, you kind of see and you take an idea of like, oh, that's the style that I like.
Yeah.
And you kind of look up to people that, you relate to and if you associate with. So I started wearing those types of outfits, and then I started thinking of a name. I was like, really, what makes sense? Like, I want something that is me, that really like, stands out. And I don't know how it was, but like the Dog Daddy just came out.
Yeah.
And I thought about it. I mentioned it to a couple of people, and I got mixed feedback on my social media. Like, it was mostly Facebook. I think people are more conservative on Facebook. Especially because they're like my oldest followers. Like, they have been doing that for the longest. That's the main platform I use. They're like, no, people are gonna think it's unprofessional. They're not gonna take it serious anymore. So, but then a lot of people were like, yes, I like that. It's gonna be so that it's kind of cool. It's and it was about 50-50, but I knew I needed a change. And the people that were saying yes, they seemed like excited about it, which was kind of the idea that I was going for. So I overnight changed everything. And this was about 2 years ago, I would say.
Yeah.
And I just changed everything. I got the Dog Daddy tattoo, which is, and again, a lot of people, they're like, oh, it's a horrible tattoo. And the way that I look at it, I went in the middle of the pandemic. I'm a very impatient person. It's completely my fault. I paid more than what it costs to go to a better tattoo artist. So it's not like that I'm trying to, be cheap. But it was in the middle of the pandemic. They were all closed, and they're just people working like underground. And the guy, pretty much was like, didn't have enough experience, and I'm completely okay with it. And oh, sorry, the light just went out.
Oh, it's okay.
So I was completely okay with it, and I went with it anyways, and I did it. And, and I didn't, like, I kind of let him decide what would be the best way to go with it after the second round. Because the first one, it was just the lining.
Yeah.
Then one line, and then he came back and did it again. And yes, it looks like a Sharpie type of, thing. But let me tell you.
But it's like on brand, It's like it fits the brand.
The thing is that the amount of respect that I gained after doing that.
Sure.
Like, I don't know if because now the way that I carry myself and I know who I am and I know exactly like the direction I'm going, I never get one single person in public that doesn't know me asking me like, why'd you have that or what is that? Mm-hmm. Like, they just look at me with more respect. Actually, they're like, like, who are you? Are you a rapper?
Yeah.
A lot of people think that I'm either like a rapper or in the movies. That's the number one question. I actually want to make a video like that because people get asked, but people come up to me like out of the blue, even if they don't know me. They're like, who are you? Like, what do you do? They're just intrigued, And I'm like, I'm just a dog trainer. And they're like, what? A dog trainer. I'm on YouTube, but I'm a dog trainer. But yeah, so
that's awesome.
But the tattoo kind of goes like that. And then and obviously when people do have someone around that says he's a dog daddy, he literally like travels around training dogs, he's got his own pack of dogs, it's really the real deal, then it makes more sense to people. Yes. But now, like, if I go to the bank, if I go to like the local stores, they don't call me by my first name at all. It's all the Dog Daddy, which was, it was a really huge thing because it's very good for branding. Like, it could be one person in the bank and they were like, "Oh, it's the dog daddy's here," and
then everybody else is like, "What?"
Funny,
yeah,
and everybody's like, "The dog daddy," and then they think it's like something funny at first, and they're like, "No, like look him up, he's the dog daddy," and they usually would tell them like, "Look him up," because that's why people know me. It's like on social media, which is all good for promoting.
And then people see you're legit.
I mean, maybe I would have done a little better job if I could, but I don't regret it because it's been a part of like helping me grow and get my name out there.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me, and I think even like if I get to explain it, that's what it is. I mean, anyone can make a mistake. I don't regret it. The only mistake is that I was impatient, and I went to a tattoo artist that was not experienced to do this type of tattoo, and I did it anyways. Completely my fault. But other than that, it's said and done, and it's fine.
What's your favorite designer brand?
I'm not allowed to say that.
Oh, you're not? All right. Fair enough.
There's a few.
Okay.
There's a few of them,
All right. Fair enough. Well, listen, man, I really appreciate you joining us. I really appreciate you spending a little bit of extra time here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This has been awesome. This is going to go live here. I'll message you afterwards and let you know exactly when it'll go live and send it to you so you could use it however you want to and stuff. And next time you're in the Ohio area, let me know and we'll see if we can.
Yeah, I'm coming to Ohio. I think it's April. I have to look at my schedule, but I have a class scheduled there.
Yeah. Do you know where? I know you were in Columbus recently.
What's the main city? I cannot pronounce it.
Columbus?
Cincinnati?
Oh, Cincinnati.
No,
Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, not too far from us. Yeah, we'll definitely have to link up when you're here.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. I will help you promote this as well. Let me know when it's live.
Awesome. All right, Augusto. I appreciate it. Take care of yourself.
Right. Nice talking to you.
Yep.